because you never. So, what we're going to talk about today is not new to us because every single week we've seen that economy, capitalism is part of this whole business, right? But it was devastating to me to see how much it was a part of it. All of this laid out by a good economist saying this is how all of this is developed. Many of the things that I have struggled with, like I hate that we have not had a labor movement in America that's really a good labor movement. And he lays out, this is why I think that's true. Because
it's the first time we've had a pro-union president in a long time.
Yeah.
Since Reagan.
So, tell me. Yeah.
I was gonna say.
Yeah. So tell me what struck you in this chapter. Hi, Carol, welcome.
Basically, how we're all on the plantation.
And we continue that plantation life in a very real way. Yeah.
Just never got out.
Yeah. And what's hard for me is not just mentally, structurally, we're still on the plantation.
Of course we are.
Right? That the structures, things that I've dealt with throughout my life, trying to work with and be in the midst of, that goes hundreds of years back in its inertia.
The only thing you can do is keep doing what you're doing.
You do have to.
I mean, there's no other alternative.
But that's really hard because you want to think that we've made some progress. And I believe we have. I believe we have. But you read a chapter like this and it doesn't feel like it in a minute, and it doesn't.
Well, I look around at some other systems and I like this system. It's working better for most people than a couple of other systems.
There are some better things about it. The hard part is, like I wanted to think that where we're at with the rich and how much they have versus the poor and how much they have, that we're at a better place then, and we're not that much different than right before Civil War. And you know what I fear most, right?
Mhm.
So are we at the same place where we're about to move that direction? It's just one more heartbreaking indication of it for me.
I was just listening to NPR. We're coming in here, and on the daily. It just had.
Sorry, now I got you gone.
They had an update on what's going on in Israel, and basically they said they're on the brink of a civil war.
Yeah.
Mm,
How about the rest of you? What struck you in this chapter?
Well, I just think we gotta throw the whole system out. I don't know that we can do that and start over. But there are some things we have to get done. An equal rights amendment has to be passed. Why are we still fighting about the voting rights? We need to get those solid down.
Yeah.
We need to do away with electoral college.
Yeah.
And I read somewhere, maybe it wasn't here, or I heard it. We need to expand the House of Representatives because that number that's in the House right now is not totally representing as big a population as we have, especially in certain areas, for instance, California, of course, but
Yeah, that number was supposed to change, but they never got around to it.
So it's hard for them as representatives to represent so many,
That's right.
a bigger, larger amount. There need to be more voices.
A representative was supposed to represent a close group of people so that they could know them. Senator wasn't meant to know all the constituents, but a representative was supposed to know that. And because of our population growth, the number of people that a typical representative is representing right now is way too big to know well. It's easier than a senator, right? But our representatives represent part of Tucson and all of Southeast Arizona, for example, something like that.
When I ran 9 years ago, when I ran, a district already had 600,000
Yeah.
people in it.
Yeah.
And now that district has 700,000
Yeah.
people in it.
Yeah.
And it was overwhelming to think that you were gonna represent that many counties and that many people 9 years ago, and it's just getting
Yeah.
exponential.
The difficulty, of course, is that if you lower the number of people that each represents, then you raise the number of representatives that have to be there. And how much, when does it become an unwieldy body? 435 is already a huge
Yes.
body. And so you go double that, right, and cut the number down to 350,000. That's still a pretty big number, but 1,000 people in a deliberative body. I think that's what's kind of gotten in the way. But we know that larger bodies can work because we've seen it on Star Wars.
Gerrymandering also is a huge problem, and both parties are doing that.
It's a huge problem, isn't it? Yeah, and that's always been a temptation is to do that. Let me make it easier for my party to be elected.
You know, the dark money, we have no idea where all this money's coming in,
Yeah.
going into all these elected reps.
Yeah.
I didn't know that corporations were citizens as
Oh,
long
yes.
as that
yes.
really made me sit up and take notice when I saw the time.
It's that Citizens United is what codified what
Right,
had been the practice.
but I didn't realize how deep that was.
Yeah.
Well, the Supreme Court made that happen.
Oh, yeah, I
Yeah,
know they
yeah.
did.
And by the way, I think that's one of the things that we have to work hard at reversing, because the codification of corporation has the same rights as an individual in many ways. It's just. Apologize for it.
Yes,
No problem.
That's the systemic part of systemic racism.
That's right.
It's the system and deeply embedded.
I know who I would choose to sit next to, and I think you made the wise choice.
We always tell Freckles, she thinks she's a person, but she's not a
That's
corporation.
not- yeah.
That's my dog breed, for those of you who don't know.
So
That's
we're just talking about all the ways that these systems are deeper and more longer lasting than what we wanted to imagine. How much they have continued from the past in the future. I loved his economic take on all this, that the Industrial Revolution in some ways started on the plantations,
Mhm.
right? It wasn't
Yeah.
industrial yet, but the systems set the
The record
assembly
keeping.
line
The logbook,
ability right in place, didn't it?
and South Carolina is a right to work state. I don't even know if Arizona is a.
Yes.
Didn't they float right to work and it didn't pass, or did it?
Yeah,
did it
no,
pass?
it's been
It's
for
right,
years,
it's right.
Yeah.
30, 40 years. it's
Oh,
been
okay,
right
because we always said right to work for less.
Yeah.
here. Yeah, that's a good way to say it.
And then another thing too is like. Our college students, they're being hamstrung. Because if they wanna go to college, they have to take out these huge loans and they're in debt their whole life. They can't even buy a house. I mean, that's how much loan for college is.
Yep,
University.
yep. Enormous debt. And yet,
It
when,
was socialist way back when.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, anytime you have what was it, 1920s or something? When did,
They use it as an epithet.
yeah, they just-
you know, and now it's like a slur word and stuff. I mean,
Yeah.
and to me, I decided I am a socialist Democrat. But, you know, it's like we just don't have, we need a safe. You know, it's like, are we gonna take care of corporations or the most vulnerable?
And I don't think I'm a socialist, but I definitely agree in helping the individual more than in helping the corporation.
Yeah. I think Jesus would have been a socialist.
Yeah.
He might have been,
He
but
was
what
a communist.
Yeah,
yeah, but what I'm saying is that he's much more that direction than what many of our policies are. And more importantly, what much of our structure is. Our structure has built-in stuff into it that makes it really hard to, makes it very easy to have the individual subside, assumed to the corporation or to the larger entity.
Well, that's been worked on by politicians for the last 20, 30 years.
Sure. But here's the thing, doesn't that give us an opportunity as a left-leaning church to speak to our right-leaning people who also say, I don't want to be told what to do by the government? And yet they're supporting government that has perpetuated that way. Can we somehow be in conversation that allows a different conversation to happen around that issue?
Union is a boogeyman, just like the word socialism.
That's right.
But
That's right.
if you talk to someone about collective bargaining, they get it.
Yeah.
And that was, again, when I was running, that was the tack that I took, was collective bargaining. And I was NEA when I lived in South Carolina, and then I was AFT when I lived in New Mexico.
Yeah.
So I'm union.
Yeah, me too. I was NEA, I was on the state board of directors here in Arizona for 80s and 90s.
Well, it's, ends up being a little bit one-sided when you have these huge corporations. And, they, don't even need to negotiate. This is the way it is.
Yeah.
And yet there's some that do care, but there's a lot that they're focused on, as everyone says, the bottom line.
But I will tell you, one of the most striking things that he said was in 2018,
You say strike?
striking, yeah. One of the most striking facts that he gave was that in 2018, 40 of the 500 Fortune 500 companies didn't pay any taxes.
Yeah.
No taxes at all. Which just to me is like,
How do we change that?
how do we change that?
We change it by voting, and as long as we don't have the votes to change it, it isn't gonna change.
no, that's.
So it's totally dependent upon people voting.
And that's what I was saying to my brother earlier today, that really the only two things that concern me, and which I feel I can have some influence on, just happen to mirror exactly what the Republicans have realized is their ticket to survival, and that is who controls education, who controls the elections.
And also women's bodies,
I'm just sorry,
also
And
women's
women's bodies.
bodies.
That's what they do with their power. Where they get their power is controlling education and controlling, right?
But we've got a Supreme Court that's gonna be conservative for a long time.
Gonna be conservative for what?
50 years,
Maybe,
yeah, it's gonna,
perhaps.
Well, that's another situation like the representatives, where they're talking about. It's not really probably gonna happen, but going to 13 because there are 9 judicial districts, so originally there are 13 judicial districts. Originally, there were 9, and that's why there were 9 Supreme Court justices. So now that there are 13 districts, they're saying it should go to 13 justices.
Roosevelt wanted to do
Yeah.
something like 18 or 25, because he was so upset and fed up with the conservative Supreme Court that he inherited. And he backed off from it. So,
Yeah,
he backed off because the Supreme Court got the sense in the depth of the Depression that there was more peril to the establishment by their continuing to
be a partisan body.
to reverse the efforts of the New Deal under a doctrine called substantive due process. And so they shifted to the left. What's interesting now is, and again, It's the other thing. Brilliance of the Republicans is that they have succeeded in, suggesting, I mean, you talk about expanding the Supreme Court pack, it's court packing, it's just what Roosevelt tried to do, it's like anytime we talk, should really have a graduated progressive income tax. Well, that's class warfare.
Yeah, they've got a tag for everything.
We want to say, the war's been on for a long, long time.
We
and
just
guess
asked-
what, you're losing.
And if we don't get the votes, it's gonna continue the way it's going.
Sure, because if we look at where the Supreme Court is today, it's because Democrats weren't active in districts and they allowed stuff to happen so that the court was changed. Now, there were some nefarious things as well.
Yeah, really.
Yeah,
But it remains that the Democrats, if they want Democrats on courts, have to be active in politics. And have to be together. But what Republicans do really well is they choose a singular way that they move together, much better than what Democrats do. Not that they're always singular, but Democrats are sometimes so scattered and sometimes against each other and at odds with each other that it stands in the way of them counteracting the very unified front that Republicans put in.
Which is a similar complaint sometimes about St. Francis being scattered and wide
Yep,
and
Yeah.
not narrowed down enough to explain ourselves as well.
So sometimes being scattered is a good thing,
Yeah.
and I
I'm
think
not
it's.
saying they were
Yeah.
right, but
Yeah.
we've heard that before.
so let me put it in a historical perspective. Republicans are much better at being the great big plantation owners that take over little by little,
mhm.
the scattered group of people. Republicans are much better at being the non-union corporate boss. And little by little take down this union and that union and that union. And at least part of what the Labor Party movement would be about is about saying, no, we collectively have a voice and we're going to be in a collective space together. And liberals have often chosen not to do that.
So, the other thing the Republican Party's really done well is to, gather a whole bunch of people that are on minimum wage and they just believe whatever anyone tells them, the party line for Republicans. If they didn't capture those people, they wouldn't have a majority, but there's just a whole bunch of people that it's just crazy.
Sure.
They harness fear.
The most damning part of this whole section was this line. For me at least, given the choice between parity with Black people and poverty, white workers chose poverty,
Mhm. I underlined that one.
right? And are we continuing to do that? Are we continuing to choose not very good, because at least it makes me better than?
But they're also very good stoking fear through culture. I mean, this whole thing about banning books, the element,
Yeah.
transgender, I mean, they're stirring people up for hate. And that's an easy thing to do in culture. It's like it's easy for people to make a scapegoat. I mean, Hitler did it, people have done it all throughout history. Like, the big leaders, tyrants and stuff.
Yeah.
It's like, we gotta go against.
So what battles that, Judy? What helps with that?
Fear succeeded on Saturday. They canceled
Oh, yeah, the drag,
right?
drag queens, that's what it was. Cause
Yeah,
I called them, I was either gonna go there to the gym,
yeah.
and basically, they said, no, we canceled. And I said, I was wondering if you were gonna have a police presence. But they said,
Yeah, it wasn't
Totally
just
canceled.
the Bridges Church, though. It was because the Proud Boys got in on it.
well, they said there was gonna be a lot of blowback.
I think too, I think things that's like getting me is like, okay, we had another school shooting. Three 9-year-olds killed, three 60-year-olds killed in a school. That could have been here.
Could have been anywhere.
It could have been our campus.
Anywhere.
It could be us in Churchill or something. It could be anywhere. They could do it right now. You know, and I'm like, what's it gonna, because the majority of people want sensible government. So what's it gonna take? I think, you know, it's like until people get so fed up that we have this mass demonstration now or something. I mean, when so many people have friends who have been impacted by this, and
Right.
even if they don't kill somebody, when you wound somebody and they have a lifetime of severe disability and stuff, that's the part we're not hearing about, are the people who are like shot and just horribly disabled.
We don't hear about that because they're all dead.
Even shot and how it affects
Yeah,
them
and
for a lifetime.
It affects the whole group.
So we,
The whole community it affects.
So, I mean,
That one thing, money for peace. And if somebody's gonna have to start suing.
someone's gonna have,
Rifle.
You can't do it.
and-
they're protected.
I have to interrupt just to say, they've secured congressional unity. There is a law that says you cannot hold gun manufacturers
Yeah.
strictly liable
It's illegal.
for this kind of damage. That shows their power, and now, you know,
yeah, but that can be reversed.
I
Yes
have
or
to
no?
say, and this is my personal opinion, that I live in Michigan, Minnesota. I once asked, I mean, I handled cases where once 14 firearms were stolen, got on the phone with the owner, and I foolishly said, it never occurred to you that instead of buying the 14th rifle, you should take that money and buy a vault, put the other 13 in. I never got such an earful. This is I should be able to leave my door on. It was, I asked a deputy, I said, Jesus, 14 firearms, who's got 14 firearms? He goes, Randy, I think in Beltrami County, the average home has 6. You gotta have your shotgun, you gotta have your deer hunting rifle, you gotta have, you know, your pistol for shooting varmints, you gotta have your self-protection.
I don't have a problem with
And
it.
so, point I want to make is, and this is discouraging, but I have concluded this after a long period of time. And I'm not a homer, I carry no grief for it. But this is the third rail of American politics. If the Democrats hope to accomplish anything, they're gonna have to give up on that issue. It's a loser every time for them.
Everybody has kids though. What about all these people that have kids? And their kids are terrified of going to school and saying, how are we gonna be
But the
protected?
majority of
The
people.
points that made, that's correct. If 20 kids, 26-year-old dead in Sandy Hook
Look, right.
isn't gonna,
If it wasn't
isn't gonna change
Sandy Hook,
things. Nothing's gonna
it's gonna
change.
be done.
And then the story is that it really wasn't true, it didn't really happen.
Well, they deny the Holocaust too.
Yeah.
These are the
I
same.
mean, this is
So
there are more firearms in America, like tens of thousands, than there are Americans.
Yes,
But here's what's amazing,
Yes.
here's what's amazing about that too, Randy, there are more firearms than we've ever had. But the percentage of people who have firearms is going down every single year. So the people who have firearms are having more firearms, while more people are. You know,
I want to speak up.
I've heard the same thing from a friend of mine who is a lawyer, or a lobbyist for Public Citizen, Ralph Nader's think tank. You know, claimed that an extraordinary percentage of America's firearms are owned by a tiny little percentage of the population.
it's not a big percentage.
It's not true, but more importantly, I mean, you know. To give you an idea, you know, I mean, they are able to generate that knee-jerk reaction to any attempt to regulate this. It's confiscation. It's gonna be confiscation. Exactly. 350 billion firearms. Who's going to confiscate them?
Not many
And
things.
what are they gonna do with them?
Yeah.
You wanna go out and knock on the door somewhere, some guy over there and say, I'm here to confiscate your firearms?
So I have two sons that were here this weekend for my brother's service. And they're both Democrat. Well, Byron's registered Republican just because, to be different.
Because there's no Democratic Party in Idaho.
But that's right, and Byron's gay, and his partner does, what's being canceled?
Oh, the drag,
Drag show.
Drag, he does drag queen
oh,
things
okay.
all the time.
Mhm.
So he's got a whole, I don't know how many guns he has. I've given him my guns and he has I think he has an AK-47. And when the Republicans really got worked up in buying firearms, Byron, knows that he could be a target. So he went out and bought an AK-47. And my other son, who's really a loudmouth liberal guy, he's got a whole bunch of guns, and he's got an AK-47 that came to him from his father-in-law. So this, I don't know what that means, except that it's not just Republicans that own guns.
It isn't. And it's not a small amount that own guns, it's still somewhere in the 40th space right in there. So quite a number of people in America still have it, but that's down from 75–80% that it used to be. So, fixing guns.
All parties are for sensible gun control.
But fixing gun lobby is not gonna be an easy task. It's not something we'll ever, be simple. But it's the same issue. Ultimately, this is what the issue is. It's bullies. Well, how do we deal with bullies? Not just in the gun issue, but in all of the things in the drag show, that was a bully move. By the Proud Boys saying they're gonna come into town and they run. What do we do in these issues to make it so the bully doesn't win?
Show up and do what you have to do.
Yeah, and it's that type of thing, I think we've oftentimes backed down from, and I get why Bookman's wasn't ready to be able to have that show.
Well,
Right.
they
Because
cited
it-
the other stores in the strip too,
Yeah.
because there's a whole shopping center.
Sure, there's a whole,
That's right.
there's a whole lot of reasons why it wasn't, but part of it is they weren't prepared enough for it. If you're gonna have opposition, you come in with both a strong security presence and a strong media presence. So that if they're going to do something, Proud Boys bully, then you've got documentation and ways to be able to move forward without. But we often back down to bullies. Because the other option that we have sometimes is to become a bully ourselves.
Right.
And that is the temptation. Right?
You become your enemy.
You become your enemy. And how do we, in all of this area, all of these economic areas, not become that?
I'll go back to you gotta vote them out. Did you see the interviews with the two Congress people that represent Nashville?
Yes, I did.
Okay, one of them
They were
homeschools his kid so that he doesn't have to worry about school shootings and says there's nothing that can be done.
Right.
And the other one posted a Christmas card with all four of his
Yeah,
kids
yeah.
carrying guns.
Yeah.
Now, how many of the friends and loved ones of those 6 dead people voted for those guys? And will they vote for him again?
One of them,
the answer to those questions?
We don't.
well, the guy who was one of the representatives is the guy where he and his wife were standing outside with their guns and stuff that time.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, he's one of the one, I mean,
He's not a Nashville representative. He was from Florida. From Missouri, he was from Missouri.
So, going back to specifically the economy issues that he's raised, what do we do about this? He laid out a damningly detailed way to say that this is ongoing, it is long-term, it is institutional. It is hard to fight.
It's embedded
It's embedded in many ways
in our
within.
DNA.
Yep, and you use that terminology, that it's become the DNA of America. How do we begin to un-DNA ourselves? What do we do?
Maybe we ought to ask Australia, they did away guns from everybody, there hasn't been any mass shootings. Come on,
New Zealand,
yeah,
yeah,
maybe we ask them,
yeah.
come in here and tell us how to do it.
What worked?
When did they do that? I don't know.
It happened about 4, maybe 5 years ago. Remember they had a shooting there.
Sandy Hook, same
No,
one,
it wasn't at Sandy Hook, it was a
No.
different, it was a shooting, it was a shooting in
New
New
Zealand.
Zealand. And immediately afterwards, they passed laws that changed it completely.
They don't have the Second Amendment.
Yeah.
That's the,
That's the difficulty.
that's the difficulty.
Yeah.
And it said for 200 years, the Supreme Court emphasized the first clause of the Second Amendment, you know, a well-regulated militia being crucial. And they said, guns are for the militia, not, not,
Yeah,
and the current Supreme Court, and
hijacked it.
Harris versus, said, no, no.
we go back
So
to
you
the
can't,
six.
you can't have a gun in New Zealand?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's an absolute prohibition, but the Prime Minister just called for it. And I mean,
There's no guns,
yeah,
basically, there's no mass shootings.
yeah, so there,
Everything is,
just like it's like Canada.
Yeah.
Well, Canada,
British colony.
Canada, you can have rifles and shotguns and so on.
I honestly don't know other than they effectively.
I had friends ask me about when I was going to Mexico for vacation in October down to Rocky Point, which isn't that far. And if I was afraid to go down there. And I said, that's very interesting, because when I was down there, the Mexican people I interacted with was, aren't you afraid up there? Because man, they shoot you guys at Walmart and every place. And you can't go anywhere unless you can be shot in the United States. They're afraid of us.
couldn't believe it.
And it's like, yeah, well, and it's just. As long as we've got this thing where it's like. We've got this small group of people who are gonna hold us hostage, the bullies are gonna dictate what the rules are.
Well, but actually, I mean, and I mentioned that, but. The rules were set in the Constitution,
Yeah.
and they were deliberately set by certain property individuals.
Yeah.
To make sure very little got accomplished by the will of the majority. You gotta
Yeah.
overcome 3 branches of government to get,
Yeah.
to affect any
Yeah.
major change.
You say there are 4 vetoes.
That's right.
Four
Well, yeah,
vetoes.
America's a country of law and property, and the people that own the property make the laws.
Yeah.
So, but I wanna ask you a question, because you were saying with regard to the, the Proud Boys come in and they shut down the train.
Well, it's intimidation.
But yeah, but you were saying like, well, you gotta go down there and do what you gotta do. What is that?
You have to
In the
stand up
context-
and, make eye contact and say, I just agree with you, and you need people behind you. You need a lot of people to do that, but they had volunteers Saturday. That's why I called. In fact, I have 3 friends that were gonna go down there also. And I said, are you still doing it? Or I'm going to the gym, one way or the other. They said it's all been canceled out.
So let me tell you,
Thank you.
That's how I would do it.
let me fill you in on what's happening since then. Group of people are in conversation from churches, synagogues, city of Tucson. Bookman's continues to be in part of the conversation, and they're trying to say, what next? Where do we go to next?
Yeah.
St. Francis has been approached as a possible site to have something happen. They might have a singular site, or they're also talking about having throughout the city, any church that wants to pick a day and a time and do a shared liturgy in all those different churches and
That's
have
great.
multiple spaces around the city. So that also
So that there are
makes
so many places that they
opposition-
could divide them up.
That's exactly right, that opposition
like that.
has to decide where to go to.
I think that's.
So the plans are in place to do something still.
Good.
You know, the bully part of that still works in some ways. My first thought was. That puts a target on St. Francis for people to come here and shoot us up.
Yeah,
Yes,
but you know what,
I mean, I'm not saying it's right, I'm just saying that was my first reaction, I'm not saying that's what I go with, but that was my
That's
first knee-jerk reaction.
yeah. So the question is this. Do you listen to the bully voice first? Or do you listen to another voice that says, we gotta move forward? And then what do we have to do to make it so that the bully voice doesn't win?
And if you confront a bully, you've got to be really aware and careful and do it right.
Yeah.
And if you don't, it can really go the wrong way.
That's exactly right.
Others,
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's the hard part is you have to be willing to be on a cross,
Yeah, I'm not,
right? That might be what happens.
and that is understanding what the consequences can be. And then if you're willing, you step up and you do it.
But I think it also helps if you step up communally. Because all of this is saying, okay, set up a certain way
Collective bargaining.
to stop individual voices from having the most power. And so you've got to collectively come together to change the powers.
Yeah.
Right?
I think that's where people like this group, this demographic, have a great potential for influence.
That's right.
I was saying to my brother, when we were talking, and we realized, it's very easy for us to talk about redistribution of wealth or massive structural change, because here we are in the autumn of life, we got ours.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We got ours, easy for you to talk,
and make recommendations.
but, I said, the way we make it is to put our skin on the line.
Yeah.
And to say, bully boy, we're gonna really prove you're a bully boy, you're gonna have to take a poke at me, with my gray hair and, et cetera, and that might influence the suburban housewives, which are really the demographic we wanna hit.
Yeah.
I mean, otherwise, demonstrations, I think those suburban housewives are saying, the way to deal, I teach my kids, the way to deal with rude people is to stay away from, don't go down there and get in trouble,
Yeah.
just go away. They're just, you've got a lot of good things to do. You don't have to be doing that. And frankly, I'd say, it's once again, I'm not risking anything by going to, stand up for, drag queens, somebody that works for a big corporation might well be,
Yeah, you're right.
and so I think senior citizens, elderly people have a role to play, but,
And I might step up, but I wouldn't be sure I had a gun with me.
I'm serious.
You would or would not,
I would.
What's that?
you would or would not.
I would.
Well, of course, and there you are, I mean, that would make
And,
sense,
and I would.
Because they're gonna shoot us.
It would.
well, but you wanna be prepared.
I'm prepared, yeah, and if it's the Proud Boys, I'm gonna have a gun with me. If it's the Bridge Church, I'm not going to. And so it's a matter of using, for me, good judgment in those kinds of circumstances.
And that's the hard part. It's not just a clear and an easy,
No,
everything simple, because there are weapons pointed, and I don't mean just a gun. I mean economic weapons. I think there's political weapons that are being pointed all the time. And we have to figure out what to do with all those weapons against us, and how do we mount that which is a good defense but also a good change agent. And the hard part about that change agent is it sometimes means, let me get a bigger gun than you. And do we lose our soul when we do that?
I don't think it works unless the bigger gun doesn't work unless someone draws a gun on you. If it's the other stuff, you step up and you take the hit and you be who you are.
Yeah,
And, you know, I've done that at some really little tiny level my whole life.
yeah.
And
No,
so-
yeah, because the bullies, the thing with bullies is that the bullies, cow people and, but when somebody stands up to them, the bully will back down.
I had a guy attack me when I was a junior in high school. And he'd been bullying me.
Yeah.
And he attacked me and I fought back.
And then he stopped bullying you.
And that's the last time anyone ever bullied me, because I don't put up with it.
No, there's the moral of the story.
And so Ralph was my friend because I learned not to put up with that.
That's right. You mean Ralph was the bully?
Yeah.
Yeah, he couldn't kick your ass. You wouldn't let him.
But the difficulty is trying to figure out when that's the right action,
That's right.
or when you have taken in some way that you become part of the problem.
When you go to the other side of the story, when you walk away.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
you
that's
really
hard.
need to know when to do that.
That is a hard decision.
It's the battle of the civil rights.
Yep.
The nonviolence versus, you know, Snick and Stokely Carmichael and the rest. And I'll tell you, as I watched the reaction of, in Middle America, I mean, this was my own, because I didn't really know anything other than what I was watching on television as a 12-year-old or so. And I saw a group of black people that were doing nothing, you know, being beset by dogs and men and horse and that image is engraven on my face, or my brain. I am certain, in light of American history, that, you know, and I should go on and finish it. When Stokely Carmichael and the Black Panthers came along
And had
and
guns.
said, you know, I'm gonna have a gun when they come.
Yeah, yeah.
All of a sudden it was, wait a minute, Middle America was, wait a minute, you know,
Yeah.
we don't want any of that, you know.
Well, no, you shouldn't do that.
But,
You know,
you know, and that's why I say the real image you gotta work. I'll look at it, be gone.
Yeah.
One of the non-violent protests, you know, the two British imperial policemen are standing there with nightsticks. And government supporters just form a line. And each of them steps up and proceeds to get whacked in the head with a nightstick. And then the next guy steps up and the next guy steps up. And they were prepared to step up until that guy's arm fell off, you know. And, you know, that's what the moral high ground is.
Yeah, and that's what they did. And that was like what calendar year, Randy? 19 what?
I think that was back in the 30s.
Yeah, I have it back in the
And
30s.
it didn't get
Until
until 1948.
Yeah, well, World War II came along.
Well, true, but I mean, that says something about, you won't be vindicated just because you stand up.
You won't be vindicated, simple and easy.
No,
Bullies get their way a lot.
Can't count on
Go ahead.
So what I've been thinking during this conversation is that we need, would possibly put into action what our Black brothers and sisters demonstrated to us, that boycotting and demonstrating are powerful. They don't make quick change, but they are powerful. The other thing is, somebody mentioned to me their displeasure with the canceling of the drag presentation of a children's book. We could do that in children's time.
Good.
Anytime.
Anytime we want.
We've got the book,
That's right.
we just need somebody who
Yeah.
wants to do it.
It doesn't even matter what book it is. It's that we say this person is going to be honored in our church by having this position.
Yeah, but Julian wants to be a mermaid.
That's a good book. That's a really good.
I've come to this late. but with the drag queen reading the children's book, who organized that?
I don't know who all was behind the organization.
Come on, no, everybody would know that that's gonna be a provocative act. So the response that occurred, that resulted in, kind of precipitated the conversation we're having. This was all orchestrated or anticipated.
Yeah.
And you by saying like, well, we're gonna continue, we gotta figure out how to do this again, it's sort of like you wanna provoke that confrontation in order to, I guess, so then if you're gonna, if you're taking that stand, it's like, there's a case where, you're inviting the bullies to come bold.
Yeah, but here's, I don't disagree with you, you're exactly right, but I see it as slightly different. In my mind, it's not that I am saying, here's an overtly provocative act. I'm saying, this is an act that shouldn't have any provocation to it at all.
I mean, but it's going to.
I know, but let me finish my point. You have to have it be normalized.
Yeah.
To the extent that that they're not sitting there saying, no, that's way outside of our norm. No, it has to be. That's why I like the second option of a whole bunch of different institutions all holding at the same time, and not just one time, but next week and the week after and the week after. It's so prevalent and so normalized that no longer becomes an issue.
It's not like one congregation where it's like you're putting a target on your back, and I'm sorry, but. I mean, it's like, St. Francis to me is right from somebody coming in and shooting us up anyway. Because of our beliefs and stuff. I mean, I think about that sometimes.
Yeah.
And I don't carry a gun and
You gotta be like him and start packing it. Sure.
Yeah.
Well, I don't pack, and I have a gun, I'm not sure, it wasn't working a few years ago. And just because we take it when we're gone during the summer,
No, but go ahead, I'm sorry.
and I don't even know where it is in my house.
An analogy to that
my little kids,
is Denmark
they find it.
during World War II. Everybody lit menorahs. They had no idea who was who.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
sorry. Because
That's not like that, I think when we have multiple congregations.
Yeah, I know, I agree.
There's no one target.
But that's always been the case, if we think ourselves right. We don't say, this is good for me, this is good for us. So, my thing has always. From 1989 on, I taught Spanish language bilingual first, second, and third graders, and have been involved in Hispanic issues since. Because I'm Hispanic? No. But because that's a population that needs support of Anglos to be able to help them legitimize the power that they have. Part of what they're asking for here is support of Anglos and Hispanics as well. In support of parity, not poverty, because Anglos have often chosen their own poverty rather than saying that person over there with darker skin is an equal of mine.
But that's how it's, that's how Donald Trump is.
He strategizes.
When you stratify people, that's exactly what happened,
Yeah.
that's the reason why socialism does,
Yeah.
that was, it's like.
But that's why we have to be very strong, not in saying I'm socialist too, so much as to say, but I believe everyone should be honored and that sense of all are welcome has to be a sense that goes way beyond just the walls of a church. It has to say in our nation, that in this business, in our economy, all are honored and welcome. And right now that's not happening.
So Jim, is there like a group, like you mentioned, a whole bunch of churches and stuff doing this?
They're in conversation.
Is it a group of pastors getting together? I know there's Arizona Faith Network, but I don't know what other groups there are that would,
There's a number of different places. Yeah, there's a number of different places. I don't know exactly where this conversation is coming from. I just know that the funnel that's sending it to me. Char is going to get on that committee so she can continue that conversation. And continue to be there, but something like PCIC is an attempt to try to put churches together, and finding what are the things that we can be together on and speak together on. So that it's a unified front in certain areas. What are the things that our politicians, whether Republican or Democrat, should be thinking about because we stood together. It's that type of unity that we have to figure out to be able to change some of this economy, some of this politics, some of this racial issue into something different than what it is.
And it is changing.
It is changing.
And it has been changing. So way back, 50, 60 years ago, there weren't many Hispanics in the Carpenters Union. That's totally different now.
Yeah.
And we can name all kinds of things where there's been change. Change is scary for most people, and it's a slow process. And just in terms of acceptance of gay people, my God, 40 years ago.
Yeah. So let me just talk 9 years ago.
Yeah.
9 years ago, 8 years ago. Supreme Court made a decision. Said that LGBT individuals can marry the same, right? Equal access to marriage. The immediate reaction is like overnight, it felt like the support of LGBT issues went from here to here, like climbed 30, 40 points. Why? Not because those people were unable to support and maybe silently supported their friends, but because suddenly they could be openly supportive. Right? If we talk about the gun issue, it's a minority that has guns these days, but why are the people why are we silent about that? Why aren't we changing that? It's because we've been taught to be silenced by like NRA and whatnot. And how do we empower each other to somehow speak and say, this is the truth about America, not that? Yeah. And part of that is because we don't know what is the truth about America right now. We're redefining what that is. But we have to start saying, what is it that's, what used to call themselves the moral majority, which is what's pushing much of this, thinks they're still a majority.
They
And I
think
think
they're
they
still
have to
moral.
be told they are not.
They're concerned, they think they are, that's why they're doing all this stuff they're doing.
Yeah. Yeah, and I don't mean just the racial minority. I think it's the racial majority. I think it's this sense of morality is not where the majority of Americans have been and will be as we move forward. It's a smaller slice of humanity that is saying, but I represent most of you. We have to start saying no.
One of the biggest fears that they tap into is that, like it or not, demographically, white people are going to be a minority. And that's exactly the fear that was driving all of that legislation, is that the enslaved people were the majority, the white people were a minority, and they were scared. And it's just history repeating itself, that I think that triggers a lot of the.
Well, let me ask you, one thought comes just flash in my mind is like, yeah, it's history repeating itself, but also the question is it history repeating itself, or is it just human nature?
Yeah, and the answer is probably yes.
Yeah, no, I think that's right.
Fear is human nature.
Well, right, and so this will be an ongoing struggle that it will never be resolved because it's human nature.
Yeah, but I think it's something.
That doesn't mean you throw up your arms and give up.
I think it's something else as well. It's not, it may be human nature to do some of these things, but it's also definitions that we're accepting as true.
Yes.
Whether or not they're true. He made this statement in this thing. American freedom became broadly defined as the opposite of bondage. Okay, I'm not the slave, so I'm free. That's a really poor, small limited definition of what freedom is. What is true freedom and how should we be proclaiming that?
Yeah.
So that that's what we're aiming towards, not just this, I'm not that person that's below me. And somehow that's the higher road. He talked in here about how the road that we chose, America chose, was a very low road of capitalism. A very low road. How do we expect a higher sense of being, a higher sense of acting from each other?
Well, one thought that comes to mind here is like, if in the context of the 1619 project and the discussion of capitalism, if America chose a low road toward capitalism, that choice was made back in 1619 when they were concerned with the plantation economy.
That's right.
Subsequently, in the intervening couple hundred years, capitalism, it's still capitalism, but it sure is going, hey, look at FDR, look at the New Deal. That's all capitalism too.
Yeah. And capitalism is not wrong, and I don't think he's saying it's wrong. It's what kind of things we choose to define our capitalism. And how do we stop letting just the first couple hundred years of our capitalism define what capitalism is for us?
Well, yeah, Randy and I were talking this afternoon, and one of the thoughts that comes to mind is like 1619 project is good insofar as it highlights the, like this reassessment of like, hey, America didn't start in 1776, it started in 1619. Well, in some ways, it sharpens or calls into more sharp illumination, the cultural differences or the historic, how we, the country chooses to view their history. No, that's not right. Yes, that's right. Well, great. That's just reality. And it's a further expression of like, hey, we're going to be fighting this battle for the rest of creation.
Yeah, and I think that's part of what we have to look at, but we have to say, what is our job in this generation?
Yeah, to be active. What do you choose to do?
How do we help that curve of justice, that arc of justice move a little bit towards?
Yes, yeah.
Right? We've run out of time. And I think we were just on the verge of solving it.
Well, these are
It's huge things. I think that was one of the biggest things in here for me, enormous. But we can let that enormity bully us into not doing anything. Or we can say, I'm going to take on that bully and do what I can. And I think that we've got to try to do the second. Thank you for your time. Appreciate it. Thank you, guys.
So, do you have a minute? Yeah, I want